Hello, my most amazing artists. Today we're going to paint a still life pear, just like artist Paul Cezanne. Here's an example of what our pear could look like. There are all different varieties, so you might see pears sometimes that are a little bit darker maroon color, sometimes they're even a little bit orange. But today we're going to use this as our model, so we're going to keep it in that nice lime green family. So I'm going to put this off to the side and get out some materials that we're going to need for this lesson. So I'm going to use watercolor paint. However, you can always create art using any material that you might have. That includes markers, crayons, or anything that you have at home. So here's what we're going to start with. I went and found a couple of different sized lids to help me get the proportion of my pear. I have my paintbrush, my watercolors, and a crayon to get my pear shape started. So in order to begin, I'm going to arrange my lids so that I have them kind of like a snowman. And I'm going to start by tracing just the bottom up about halfway on both sides of the larger lid. Now I'm going to take the smaller lid and do the same on the top. So just about halfway and stop. So I kind of have the top and the bottom and the middle I'm going to fill in. So now I'm just going to take my crayon and connect those lines, and you can kind of see my pear shape starting to take shape. Now I'm also going to add a stem and maybe even if you want a leaf. So I'm going to just put one of those in there so that you can kind of see what you could do for your pear as well. So the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to start thinking about adding my background, believe it or not. We're going to do our background first, and then we're going to worry about the pear second. So I'm going to put my crayon aside, find a paintbrush. You might want to even think about using a little bit larger paintbrush if you have one. It will take less time. I'm going to dip in the water here, and I'm going to choose a background color. So I'm going to start with this, I think, light blue color and show you that you can just go ahead and fill in around your pear. So I sometimes like to outline my pear first, and that way it kind of acts as a barrier to keep me from accidentally painting over something that I don't want to. So I'm kind of outlining my pear. And now I'm going to go back with my blue colors and start painting in. Now, toward the top of the paper, I'm going to create an emphasis that is lighter blue. And then as I move down the paper, I'm going to start adding maybe some darker shades of blue in my paint. So I'm a couple different shades that I can utilize, but if you don't, you can always just use more water, it makes it lighter. Less water makes it a little darker. So I'm going to go ahead and just give it a quick paint. It doesn't have to be super careful. In fact, I kind of like those rough brush strokes. It kind of gives it that Cezanne look a little bit more even. So you can see I filled it in pretty quick. Again, adding a little bit lighter at the top, making it a little darker in the sides and the bottom. Okay, so now that I've filled in my pear, I mean my background, I'm ready to do my pear. All excited about the pear. Now, the first thing I'm going to choose is yellow. So I'm going to start with my base of a nice warm yellow. And I'm just going to go ahead and paint the whole pear right in. Again, not being super careful about my brush strokes because it kind of gives it that rough textured painted look, which is what we're going for. All right, so now I'm going to even add my stem a little bit there, fill in some of those holes. Okay, now that I've done my pear, I'm ready to think about adding some of the green tones. So I've added my yellow, and I'm just going to use green as a shadow. So if you were to think about your pear as where the light was hitting it, you would see that on the one side, if we had sun coming from this corner, these would be a lighter shade, and here you would see the darker shadow. So we'll go ahead and add some highlights and some shadows. So I'm going to start with some shadows here with a little bit of green. I'm just going to come over here. There's no real trick to the shape. You just kind of add it in and kind of blend it once you have it the way you like it. As for the leaf, I'm going to create a darker green here and maybe use some of my lighter tones or less green here and just paint in the leaf. And I'm not going to do the stem quite yet. So here's my green shadows. I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to add some highlights. So I'm going to use the white to create some highlights. Now it's a little harder with watercolor paint, but I'm going to try to get a lot of white on my brush. And then I'm just going to come over and add in where I would think I would see some lighter tones. So I'm going to add some white and kind of just blend those in to my pear. Come back and maybe add some, just to create that, maybe a little bit more yellow in here, just to give it some blending. And that is pretty good for my pear. I'm happy with that. So now the last thing, it's a little artist tip, is that we're going to create a shadow where your pear would sit on the table. And in order to do that, Cezanne was famous. He didn't use black. He would use a mixture of the colors that he was already using. So in order to do that, I'm just going to show you how you would mix some red and, believe it or not, a little bit of green to create your shadow along the bottom. And you can actually mix right on the paper, or you can mix on your lid if you have a lid or a little mixing palette. Like I could use my lid right here, add some red, and then go back and add some green to kind of create this brown-like color. Pretty magical. I'm going to use that brown now to create the shadow where your pear would sit along the table. So I might have some darker shadow down here, and also maybe a little under the leaf and a little on my stem. So you can kind of see already it's giving it that kind of cool painterly look. Here I'm going to fill it in, maybe add, I see I went out of the lines a little here, so maybe I could go back over with my blue here, fill some of that in, pull some of that shadow along. There we go. And voila, you have your painted Cezanne pear. Hope you enjoyed creating a still life today. Keep on creating.